So as Pastor mentioned, the only way to get our region open is to get the ICU number percentage higher, that's available beds. And we have one of two options. We can stop going to the hospital, which probably isn't the best choice, right? You know, if you gotta go, you gotta go. However, what we do have in our control is to better our health. And I'm just, you know, I sound like a broken record. I feel like I sound like a broken record, but it's all the same stuff. If you want my opinion on what's happening, you know, I was just listening to a lecture this week on regard to skin manifestations of COVID-19, and it was interesting what the lecturer had to say. She said that the problem that's going on, this is stuff that you can find on the internet, that the problem with COVID-19 and why people are dying, having serious illness, is because of inflammation. And inflammation is triggered in the body by the virus, but also too, your body probably could have an innate level of inflammation. And so what inflammation is it's a lot of cytokines and proteins that are just thickening the blood, and it causes disease. You have a lot of free radicals, which causes cell damage, which then causes inflammation again. And so the only way to really decrease that inflammation is by oxidants. All right. So antioxidants, where do we find those? Well, we find those in our fruits, our vegetables, our whole grains, right? Sound familiar? Same story. All right. And it's just also interesting too that during this lecture, this individual was talking about one element that we've talked about several times, and that is vitamin D. Because when you have vitamin D deficiency, your blood actually has a lot more clotting ability, so it superclots. And so when the virus comes along, which causes clotting, by the way, and you want to know why people are dying from the heart attacks and strokes with the virus, it's because of the clots that are forming based on the inflammation we discussed. But also, too, the immune system is not optimized, and it just goes awry, and it becomes too aggressive, and you get more clots to form. And so to decrease that, number one, like I said, you have to eat plenty of fruits, vegetables, whole grains. Vitamin D also helps decrease your risk of thrombosis or clotting, especially with this virus. And it's interesting, there was an article that came out at the end of October, beginning of November, and you can Google this online, that those who were vitamin D deficient were twice as likely to have a bad outcome with COVID-19 versus those who were vitamin D sufficient. So if you had adequate levels of vitamin D3, you were less likely to have a bad case of it by 50% off the top. All right? So anyway, so how else can we decrease this inflammation in our body? And this is an article that was published on December 3, and it says replacing red meat with plant-based proteins reduce the risk for heart disease. And if you want my opinion, is that the virus is probably just speeding up that heart attack or stroke that would be coming down the line eventually. Who knows when, but it was heading that direction. Not to say all cases are like that, but a vast majority of that's probably what's happening. So anyways, this article says, replacing red meat with quality plant foods such as beans, nuts, or soy may be associated with the reduced risk of coronary artery disease, according to a study published in the British Medical Journal. So we're not talking about some offshoot journal here. Researchers analyzed food frequency questionnaires from participants in the health professionals follow-up study and compared red meat and processed meat consumption and sources of plant-based proteins with heart disease events and mortality. In other words, death. The total red meat and processed meat intake was associated with an increased risk for heart disease, while one serving per day of plant-based protein options such as legumes, whole grains, soy products was associated with a lower risk for heart disease. Possible mechanisms for the lower risk include increased intake, the possible mechanisms for risk include increased intake of saturated fat and heme iron, and increased bad cholesterol, or the LDL, and total cholesterol levels associated with meat intake, as well as the pro-inflammatory compounds found in meat. The authors also attribute the lower risk to the replacement of saturated fats with the polyunsaturated fats from the plant protein sources. So and once again, we do have an element of control in our hands regarding this, and it's best to look at our eating habits and things that we may be doing or not doing, and maybe decide to make some changes this now instead of waiting until next year, even though next year's 2 weeks away. But once again, one of the reasons why we're suffering so bad here in the United States is because we're just a sick nation. There's no other reason, and believe me, vaccine or no vaccine, this isn't going to be easy. And to be honest, somebody could have my vaccine. Actually, I'm not going to have it because I have reservations about that as well. But that's another time. But anyways, the long and short of it, we do have the ability to change our health, and it's never too late, and now is the time more than any time. And so that is my hope and my prayer today. Amen.